Hello, Miami, and welcome to the We Can Do Better show. I'm your host, Damian Pardo. I'm also City of Miami Commissioner for District Number 2. I have the great pleasure today of having with me Gloria Antia, who's a senior park naturalist, City of Miami, and we recently met doing a Leave No Trace tour off of Morningside. And I was personally very surprised to know that you exist in the city of Miami, that we even had a park naturalist. And I was also super impressed with your knowledge. So thank you very much for being on our show. And I thought we could start maybe with just talking a little bit about you personally, like how you got to Miami, how you got to the city.
Hi, sure. I've been in Miami for about 27 years, most of my life. My professional career mostly goes back to the nonprofit environmental education, where I spent about 14 years of my career, and recently my past 8 years with the city of Miami.
The last 8 years?
Yes, the last.
And your job responsibility is described how?
So I am the senior park naturalist for the city of Miami. I'm under the Department of Parks and Recreation, and I'm the division of natural areas. So we have the natural areas division under the Parks and Recreation Department.
And when we were doing Leave No Trace, when we first met, we were basically implementing a policy the city of Miami has, which basically says that if you're out on the islands, you need to take your stuff with you. I know this is like very basic and very common sense, and part of me is incredibly annoyed that we're still dealing with resiliency and so many issues with the environment in this manner, but it's civility. You just take your trash with you, have a bag, and leave. Tons of garbage was picked up before we even did this tour of the islands off of, in the bay off of Morningside, the Spoil Islands as they're known. And I was incredibly impressed with your knowledge of just the trees, just everything. And I thought maybe you could share some of your thinking about the Spoil Islands and how the city interacts and some of the policies maybe that we should be thinking about.
Okay, interesting. Just to tell you a little bit about my core role with the Natural Areas Division, I manage our natural forest communities, which include Simpson Park, Alice Wainwright, and Virginia Key. Unfortunately or fortunately, the islands are under our operations department under the Parks and Recreation Division. Mm-hmm. So I play a role of giving some recommendations, the core of the program and the initiatives being carried out by the operations division. But in general, we can see, and it doesn't take a conservationist or a naturalist to see the detrimental effects of the pollution that is happening in these islands. So part of our tour, we went out there and we even though there was a large collection of trash being picked up prior to our tour, there was still trash there. Yeah. And we were able to observe the detrimental effects of some of the activities that we see there and how people are leaving the trash in the island. So the Leave No Trace campaign mostly is to educate the community, because part of enjoying our natural areas, our outdoors ecosystems, is to protect them as well, to conserve them. Yeah. So Leave No Trace says just trash, pick up your trash and leave no trace, leave everything as you found it. Yeah. So the amount of trash it is impacting in several ways, not just our wildlife, but our health in general. All of this trash ends up in the ocean, but it's also, might cause issues, health issues to the people that are even there enjoying the island. So it's also for your own benefit to clean up.
I was struck not only by the amount of trash, but all of the microplastics that are filtering into the bay. I live off of Morningside, and I've seen several fish kills. I've seen, very warm waters, just things I've never seen in my lifetime. And it makes me wonder what we're leaving for the next generations. Or sometimes, are we the frog in the boiling pot of water? Like, we don't, is it too late? Like, I mean, right. Do you ever think of these things or how it translates to policy?
Absolutely. Some of these islands are hosting federally protected species like mangroves. So we have mangroves, they serve as rookeries. So they provide home for different protected birds and wildlife in general. So protecting these natural resources for the future generations is huge. And also, as our county as part of our beauty and what it hosts, what it means historically and culturally, like you mentioned, for future generations is big. The more that we continue these detrimental activities, then the more poor quality of life in general that we have, not just for our community, but for our visitors.
And what do you think are some of the things we should be thinking about in terms of like invasives or plant,
Great, thank you. So a big part of my role is conservation, as well as environmental natural resources management. So a lot of it includes the enhancement of these areas, which is removing invasive exotic species.
Can you explain what those are?
Invasive exotic species are trees, plants, shrubs that do not belong to our ecosystems and that take over an area. They sort of act as bullies in high school. They come in, they take over, and they don't let anything that is native continue thriving. So typically they form monocultures. Monocultures are species that their characteristics is there's only one of each one. So imagine our species depend on biodiversity. The way that you look, the way that I look, the way that we coexist, the more biodiversity, the better that and healthier are, not just environmentally wide, but even, the way that we coexist.
And why is that? Why is biodiversity important?
Incredibly important. Once we have a monoculture or one of the same species, then you start losing resources.
And give an example. What would be a monoculture of an invasive?
Great. Australian pine, a Brazilian pepper. They take over, and once you have one of a single species, then you have species that are starting to go extinct, because they do not have the resources or the specific tree that they need in order to survive. All of those species start dying off, and with them, the rest of the species that rely on that one start dying off as well. It's a chain. It's a chain reaction.
And what are we doing to try to minimize that?
Exactly. So some of our program involves, removing the invasive exotics and then doing a reforestation program. So once we remove those invasive exotic species, then we plant native ones. And this is a part where we also educate the community, we engage the community in not just removing them, but being part of the planting process and understanding that, for example, Virginia Keys, a barrier island, that we need these barrier islands to be healthy because they're protecting our mainland. With the storm surges, these are the forefront. This is what, where if we have a hurricane, this is what's going to hit first. Those wetlands, those mangroves are protecting our mainland. And in general, our green infrastructure is what is absorbing and taking, all that extra water that we're having with heavy rainfall. So more pervious surfaces that absorb that water do promote less flooding, which, is one of the issues that we have.
Right. And I know that we've been talking a lot recently, and I think it's a very good idea about depaving some of the spaces or getting rid of more of those concrete spaces that create runoff and are not pervious. They're not serving as any kind of reservoir. Do you have any thoughts on that?
In general, the more and the healthier that your green infrastructure is, your trees, your green spaces, then the better, that we have more areas that absorb our water and that replenish our aquifer. As you already know, our source of drinking water depends on how it is replenished and also how healthy our water quality is. So the more chemicals that are going into our drinking water system, then, the more that we probably need to worry about that. So planting more trees that are native, that are not just planting trees or improving these green areas, but making sure that it's quality trees. Because you might think, we're planting trees, it's a good thing. But if you're not planting the right tree in the right place, then you might be causing more problems. So also understanding a little bit of how do we enhance those natural species, those trees that are native or friendly, Florida friendly, that require less water, require less maintenance, and that are stronger in terms of hurricane season, so that are going to, take the force better, that are going to survive.
Serve as a barrier.
Better. So all those qualities are important.
I mean, I've lived in Miami my whole life, and I have a park very close to my home, and I never considered that so much thought went into any of this, nor that we had people as competent and knowledgeable and caring as yourself that really cares and thinks through and wants to help people understand this for all of our sake, for our ability to succeed as a community. I'm wondering, in parks like Simpson, that's a very unique park. Can you talk a little bit about Simpson Park?
Absolutely. Simpson Park is a great example of a holistic approach in terms of how a green space like Simpson Park, which represents the remnants of the Brickell hammock. This is what is left after all the development in Miami-Dade County.
Explain that a minute. What was the Brickell hammock? What was
the Brickell hammock? Great. That was our forest. So
I never saw that forest.
Pioneers,
I've never
this
seen
is
that
it.
forest.
If you want to see it, you go to Simpson Park because this is what is left.
Which is not a lot.
It's not a lot. It's 8 acres. Yeah. And prior to development and civilization, we had the forest running from south of the Miami River all the way to Homestead. Wow. And now we have this little piece of green space that, luckily the city of Miami is very unique because we are conserving and maintaining this little piece of land, and we are the protectors of this little piece of land. So that is Simpson Park, but not only it is important because of the environmental aspect and the trees that are left there, sort of like your tree museum. Mm-hmm. If you want to see what Brickell hammock used to look like, you go to Simpson Park. Is rudimentary in terms that the trails are still kept intact. So you have a lot of the rock formations. You won't have a paved trail. You won't have, you'll have the root systems going through the trail. But it also represents a cultural jewel in terms of a historic park. So we do have a facility that was built in the 1930s. And it also represented, a piece of history.
The Coral Rock kind of house, yes. That's there. So it's more like a botanical garden that's historical.
Correct.
In the area of Miami.
Yes. Definitely the idea in the future is to convert this space in our environmental center. So right now it's part of like our office space and it's part of the park. But in the future, as we maybe gather more resources, then we can convert it into our environmental center with interactive displays and enhancing it more for the community and the visitors. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about Virginia Key because there's so much pressure and jurisdictions on Virginia Key. It belongs, the county, city of Miami, you have village of Key Biscayne, and then you have a lot of development interests. And, you're in that space where you kind of have to try to balance all of these competing interests. Maybe you could talk
Absolutely. That is a very interesting topic. So I manage a portion of what's considered the natural areas of Virginia Key. Virginia Key is huge. It's more than 1,000-acre barrier island, and it hosts the Marine Stadium, the Rowing Center. I have a portion of the Virginia Key North Point Park, the natural areas, which is also separated from the historic Virginia Key. So interesting you mentioned that because as we continue evolving, we can see more interest in definitely expanded capacity of visitors and residents, coming to enjoy an area that is still pretty much looking into its natural conditions. There's not much left like Virginia Key. If you go to South Beach or if you go to the rest of the the beaches in South Florida, very, very few look like Virginia Key. So it's a very interesting balance and the role that I play because sometimes I have to be the protector and I have to, although the idea is to enhance these areas for visitors and the residents, also to protect it. So to educate them about possible activities that can impact the area while they're, recreating. So sometimes my role is educating and saying, these are dune ecosystems. They're dune ecosystems. So we have dune ecosystems, we have mangroves, which are wetlands, and we have a hammock, just to mention a few of the 3 ecosystems.
And pretty much pristine, you said, still in very good condition compared to the rest of the developed.
Yeah, we've been working on it because of the invasive exotics and the health of it. They're constantly threatened. So the conversation is, we want to make sure that you enjoy it, but here's, our dune. This is the area that protects our mainland or that prevents erosion from continuing to happen, which the erosion that we're seeing in the beach is exponential. So there's our plans to protect. So we got to make sure that we don't trample them, that we don't pull them out, that you don't, set up your entire picnic on top of this protected plants. So it's more about educating and coming to a balance of recreation use, but also the protection and the conservation of the areas. And it's not easy. It's a challenge.
No, I mean, I noticed that all of the Australian pines are gone from the south side of the entrance. Like when you come into Key Biscayne on Crandom.
Oh, yes.
They've
that's
all
county project.
Yeah, it's a county
yes.
but nothing's replaced it. So
yeah, that's an interesting project. I don't know. It looks more like a shoreline improvement.
Yeah, like a shoreline. And I also notice a lot more climate resiliency methods being used for shoreline resiliency all along throughout parks and throughout our coastline, all the way. Wondering in Virginia Key, other than obviously educating, which is a very important role, how do you interact with other parts of City of Miami? Maybe OCI, Office of Capital Improvements, other that, they're actually in their building. We've had a lot of conversations with the rowing club and the mooring fields, again, competing interests. How maybe you make your way through that?
That's an interesting question. I'm limited to give recommendations. A lot of my role is more of here's the research, here's the information about what's in here, and then communicating that to the leadership team for them to make the decisions. So while my participation level is at these meetings, it depends on a case-to-case basis.
Yeah.
And
I think we're also lucky that we do have a lot of folks in the community who care. And we have, the Key Biscayne Trust and, the community and community groups that are involved and that want to play, a larger role in all of that. You mentioned before we started this program that you had been working in the nonprofit world. And I was telling you that one of the things about serving as commissioner, as somebody that for a long time was in the nonprofit world, mainly as a volunteer in that space, was that when you are a commissioner, there's an awful amount of money that you can help with and power where you can direct to projects that are important, really, especially in our office, driven by residents and people that we listen to, much like yourself, who we hopefully will rely on very much as we move into the future, because these are very, very important issues. I mean, we have the entire coastline in District 2, from all the way from Morningside almost to the Cocoa Plum Circle.
That's right.
So it's and in these rains that we've had now, we get all the calls about the flooding. And I'm very impressed in the way that we're managing it, because for the first time I see, the pumps going on, the things getting done. And while I haven't been in this role before, but it's a pleasure to be able to see how competent our folks are and how they really do respond, to residents. I don't think I appreciated that as someone with a park next to me, nor did I imagine that someone like you could get on a spoil island and literally walk us, leaf by leaf and tell us this is what this plant is, that's what that plant is. And someone with your expertise, could help guide us. I'm thinking for the regular resident that's out there, like you just said, they don't know what kind of tree to plant or really what to do, but they care about their surroundings, their children, and a future. What can they do? How can they interact maybe with you, with the city, to learn more?
Good question. Definitely always advocate for the natural resources. Like you mentioned, I do feel that it's still sort of an obscure somewhat role that we play behind the scenes. We are on our knees under the sun, planting and removing and sweating and doing the dirty hard labor to make sure that these ecosystems remain healthy and are part of our conservation efforts, which, believe it or not, and indirectly impact our everyday lives. And you don't see it because you're at home, right, going about your business, but you're not thinking about the dunes and the wetlands. Not everybody is doing that. So I do think that your everyday actions, what you do at home, you got to start with that. How do you conserve water? How do you recycle? How do you educate yourself about what proper trees, right tree, right place should you have in your yards. What there are resources. Exactly.
That's such a good point. Sorry to interrupt, but it's such a good point because I have no idea, honestly. I mean, I'm being honest. You know, when I during the campaign, when I went door to door, all I knew was, especially in the Grove, when I was under a canopy, it was 15, 20 degrees cooler. When I lost the canopy, which is, if you go up Biscayne on the boulevard, any part west, there is very little canopy. It was so hot. I mean, it was horrible. So.
Absolutely. Volunteer, become involved with their community. I'm not saying it's easy work.
How can they do that? How can somebody even? You
can contact, we have under the Parks Department, a link under, if you want to volunteer, you can log in there and you can tell us, what your interest is in there. So you can do it through our website.
That's a great idea.
Yeah. And again, I think the biggest help that you can do, it's looking at your everyday actions and how you.
What are some everyday like for me?
Water conservation, recycling.
And is recycling really effective? Because I've heard so many things. Like now I look at my recycling bins and I'm like,
You're right. So I actually thank you for mentioning that, because rather than recycling, why don't you look more at the products that you're buying? The packaging. So let's start there, because you're right. The recycling. The water bottles, or do you have your reusable water bottle? Little things like that can help.
I do have a reusable water bottle.
I know sometimes I'm guilty. Yes, sometimes, and you cannot always have it. But little things that you can do to prevent just having that extra, even better than going to the recycling, because you're right. That's another probably conversation and how that, really is.
Yeah. I don't think the city of Miami can fix this, but I noticed when I was in Europe, all the little tops for all the bottles stay on the bottle, right?
I saw that.
And talking about microplastics, right? And I'm wondering, how can we help change policy, or how can we, as a city, address this? I mean, these are things that, in our office, our whole office emphasizes engagement, like all the time.
Yes.
Because our biggest power doesn't come from money or position or it comes from people. Right. And there's a lot of stuff on our agendas about resiliency and climate. And I haven't seen an agenda where there isn't anything on it, including like Leave No Trace was passed, these policies. I think it's great for people to become more engaged and come to those meetings and speak up about their concerns. They can get exposed to the different departments, people like you that can also help.
And then that in turn allows people like you in your role to channel the resources to, for example, us, the Division of Natural Areas that's doing conservation, or, for you to learn, who's in your department doing this and that? How do we, so if we have more resources, if there's more, roles within my division, we have very, very minimum staff that can be only dedicated to, let's say, this part of education.
How much is the staff in your department?
That's a great question. Do we really?
You can say it. I mean, I don't expect it,
We are working on improving the division. I would like to definitely restructure the infrastructure of our staff. Right now, there's only one park naturalist in the entire city of Miami, senior. And then we have a park naturalist position, which is currently open right now. Mm-hmm. We need to improve that position. We just lost the person that was there, which is great. And then we have 2 full-time people that maintain the parks, and 2 part-time people that helps us with the education. And that part-time is very part-time. Yeah. So I'm a multifaceted staff, because I have to do the administration, I do the coordination, I have to do different roles into biologist, horticulturist, certified arborist. So I have to play many roles.
So something, you bring up a great point. Right now it's budget season for City of Miami, and we're doing those public budget meetings. I went to one of them in my district as well. And for those people out there, I think this is a great time for folks out there to be heard. Like, if this is important, everything Gloria's talking about, then please come to those budget meetings or come to the commission meeting, speak up, and let the city management, the administration, know that we need to grow these areas because that's our future, really. You know, if we want to succeed as a global city and still retain what makes us special, we really need people like you, more of you, in that area. What would you, in this role, since you've been here now a while, what would you like to see as far as the future? If you had a vision, let's say tomorrow, the administration said, here you go, all the money in the world.
Oh, that's great. We do want to make sure that as the city of Miami, we rely on our partnerships and support the community on the efforts that you do. And like you mentioned, the educational component, which we have two branches, the education and the actual on the ground conservation, restoration, enhancement of this area is going on. So definitely if we can grow the roles that we play into how we communicate this to the community, to other parks. So how do we, maybe hire more people to do a branch with education components in natural areas only, or volunteer engagement only? That would be really helpful. Or even, to even bring out more of the Leave No Trace campaigns, because it's all about education. But the education obviously is not only what we need, the doing in the ground work, the actual removal, the actual technical aspect of making sure that these lands are healthy and are being enhanced appropriately, are important. So there is room for people in these careers that are eager and passionate, and I am sure that would love to be part of our team and that are dedicated. And that our main goal and our vision is to improve our community and to provide a healthier ecosystem for us, because at the end of the day, we're all interconnected.
Sure.
If our health relies on these ecosystems. So as long as we have these ecosystems healthy, then we are healthy. And that's one thing that we want to make sure that we create that connection of, we're connected. We're connected to our oceans. We're connected to our land as humans.
Right.
And, are we thinking about how are these ecosystems being managed and cared for and prioritized?
Yeah. No, those are all great points. And I mean, you said it, you're laboring, you're actually doing the planting, and you're out there in the sun and doing all that work.
Driving the chainsaw.
Yeah,
I got the chainsaw.
Wow.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I wouldn't trust myself with a chainsaw.
I know, it's not playing. It's not playing games.
No. But it strikes me that we have at least 30 parks just in District 2 in our office district. Mm-hmm. So how you can possibly keep up with all the work or even maintain all the work, it seems like a huge task in front of you and in front of the city.
The operations, for parks.
Well, listen, we're coming to the end of our 30 minutes, Gloria. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I would tell folks out there to contact our office, our District 2 office. You can find us online with any of these questions. We're happy to provide more resources for you. And we will see you again on the We Can Do Better show. Thank you.